12, and we've just done the news. We're coming back from the news, and this is the Hypothesis and Epiphany part 13 in the show cycle of this topic. If you're interested in listening to any of the prior 12 parts, you'll find those on YouTube, or you'll find them in the archives at the station. So, got through that, and I've got the stream up and running. Hurrah! Or huzzah! Yes! And has Dave gone totally mad? Possibly. I'm just excited, Mecky, because this is one of my favourite parts of the hypothesis.
I know, right?
Yes, that's right.
Well, do I start or do you start?
You can start.
All right. Physicists prove quantum spookiness and start chasing Schrödinger's cat. This was published in 2015, October 24. The world of quantum mechanics is weird. I would say it's inexplicable at the moment, but let's go with weird. Objects that are far apart can influence each other in what Albert Einstein called spooky action at a distance. And cats can potentially be dead and alive at the same time. For decades, scientists have tried to prove that these effects are not just mathematical quirks, but real properties of the physical world. And they are getting somewhere. Researchers have finally proven in a new study that the link between particles at a distance reflects how the universe behaves, rather than being an experimental artifact. Meanwhile, another team of researchers have set out to show that a living creature, albeit a bacterium, think about that for a second, can be in two different quantum states at the same time, just like the cat in Schrödinger's thought experiment. Bell's inequality test. But let's begin with the paper published in Nature, which proves that the world is inherently spooky. All systems described by quantum mechanics can display so-called entanglement. For example, an electron, like a coin, can spin in two directions, up and down. But two electrons can be entangled so that a measurement of the spin of one electron will define the spin of the other. According to quantum mechanics, the spin of one electron cannot be known in advance of a measurement, yet will be perfectly correlated with the other, even if it is in a distant location. Einstein didn't like this because it seemed to imply that the information can be sent from one electron to the other instantaneously, breaking a rule that says nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. He instead thought that there were hidden variables encoded in each electron that could determine the results if only we could access them. But in the 1960s, Northern Irish scientist John Bell came up with a method to test Einstein's theory. Bell's inequality is satisfied only if actions in one location cannot affect another instantly, and the outcomes of measurements are well defined beforehand, something dubbed local realism. Bell showed, theoretically, that quantum entanglement would violate his inequality test, but local realist theories containing Einstein's hidden variables would not. This is because the link between entangled particles is stronger than Einstein wanted to believe. So, if the measured correlation between pairs of particles from an experiment was above a certain threshold, it would be incompatible with hidden variables, and entanglement would win the day, Dave.
See, I'd bet on entanglement to win.
On the money.
Yeah, that's right. Bell's theorem. The desire to test this in the lab has driven huge experimental advances in the 51 years since Bell's paper. However, all implications of Bell's tests to date have contained loopholes that have left some wiggle room for the universe to obey local realist theories. One of these was that the efficiency of their measurements was too low, known as the detection loophole. Although the data obtained violated Bell's inequality test, it may not be a representative sample of a complete set due because some photons in the experiment couldn't be detected. Another loophole was that the measurements were too slow. It's called the locality loophole. If the measurements devices were able to communicate with some unknown, slower than light channel, they could share information and influence the outcome of the impending measurement. The new study is the first experiment to simultaneously close both of these loopholes in a test of Bell's inequality. The scientists used a laser to make specific electrons, each within a diamond located over 1 kilometer apart, to increase their energy and emit a particle of light, a photon, which was entangled with the state of the electron. The photons were then sent through an optical fiber and to be united at a third location. If they arrived at just the same time, the photons would interact with each other and become entangled, meaning their remote electron buddies would become entangled too. Very cool. The electron spins were then measured to test Bell's inequality. The two loopholes were closed by ensuring that the efficiency and speed of the readout were sufficiently high. As a result, the team were able to demonstrate conclusively that the universe does not obey local realism. The outcomes of measurements cannot be known in advance, and half of an entangled state can exert spooky action on its remote partner. The physics famous feline. I'll take this, you take the next one. Entanglement is not the only type of unusual quantum behavior. Another effect is known as superposition. And it's the ability of a particle to exist in two states, for example, spin or even location, simultaneously, and is now regularly observed in laboratories around the world. For example, electrons have been known to travel through two slits at the same time. That's a single thing taking two separate paths. That's when we are not watching. The minute we observe each slit to catch this behavior in action, the particle chooses just one. And that's the essence of the double slit experiment. The observer changes the outcome. Because what do, Meki? We expect it not to take double of it, double paths.
Correct.
And therefore collapse the probability to an outcome that we expect.
Yeah. Which is profound, to say the least.
Now, Meki, in addition to this, they were able to quantum entangle. What's my favourite little creature?
The tardigrade.
The tardigrade, yes.
Yeah. Now, this is a multicellular organism. This is not just some kind of bacterium or virus. This is an actual living creature with 6 legs. I love those little guys.
Impervious to tons of things, yeah.
Oh, if anything lives,
heat,
it will.
Cold, zero vacuum.
Yeah, completely. The space bugs. You're right. They did. Now, that's really something else. And the trick here is, of course, that we have no idea why that is the way it is, unless, of course, you go to the metaphysics of it, which is a whole different, can of worms. Now, quantum superposition made easy. However, we do not observe these effects directly in daily life. For example, the glass that I have here cannot be in two places at once, or I would struggle to drink it. Makes sense, right? But because we don't encounter such bizarre things, it would seem logical that at some scale, things switch from the real world over of the quantum to our familiar everyday. Right? So at some point, the quantum effects seem to wash out, as physicists have stipulated. But what is the scale at which this switch happens? If we had a technically perfect experiment, would we be able to observe large objects in these superposition states? That is the question posed by Schrödinger's thought experiment, in which a cat is placed in a sealed box with a flask of poison and a single radioactive atom, which will undergo decay at a random time. If the atom decays, the flask is broken and the cat is poisoned. If it does not, the cat lives on. By waiting for the atom to decay, does the cat exist in both states at once, as the atom does? We know that when we open the box, we must find the cat alive or dead. But is it a property of the universe or the observer that makes the cat choose its state? Now, Schrödinger actually formulated this to show the absurdity of quantum physics. He wanted to show how absurd. He didn't think that the cat was actually in both states. He just wanted to show, look, this is an experiment here, a thought experiment. It's clearly nonsense, right? But back to the team preparing to address this very question. Again, remember, bear in mind, Schrödinger did not want to take. He wanted to prove the absurdity once again. Now, the team in question that is trying to address this very question, their proposal involves putting a bacterium rather than a cat in a state of superposition. And as Dave has just said, we've managed to entangle a tardigrade before. Recent technical advances based on superconducting microwave resonators, devices used to detect radiation and for quantum computation, have enabled physicists to observe quantum effects in tiny, flexible aluminum membranes, or if you're American, aluminum, known as the micromechanical oscillators, coupled to the circuits. Okay, so tiny little aluminum membranes. Tiny membranes count as large objects in the world of quantum physics because even with a mass of only 50 picograms, which is 50 trillionth of a gram, they contain hundreds of billions of atoms. And I think that gives you a bit of an idea of the scale of things here. However, these resonators have to be cooled to within a fraction of absolute zero, which is minus 270 degrees centigrade, at which point nothing moves, before any quantum behavior emerges. Otherwise, thermal vibrations mask the effects. The team plans to put a bacterium on top of such a membrane, which would then be cooled to its lowest state of energy. The membrane would then be placed into a superposition of two different states of motion, two different types of oscillations. They aim to show that the effect of the bacterium on the properties of the oscillator would be minimal, with the oscillator effectively behaving as if the bacterium were not there. In this way, the bacterium would effectively be in two states of motion at once. The researchers also plan to entangle the position of the bacterium with the spin of an electron inside it. The proposed experiment would be impressive, but mainly for showing that quantum mechanics holds true for objects bigger than subatomic particles. But it seems unlikely to answer whether Schrödinger's cat can be alive and dead at the same time, because the bacterium would remain in a constant glass-like state of cryopreservation. If this were the cat, it would exist in suspended animation rather than in a superposition of simultaneous life and death. And to be honest with you, if you get the cat to minus 273 degrees centigrade or Celsius, it would be dead. It would be very dead indeed. There'd be no question over its state of being. It would be very, very dead. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's not coming back from that.
Very sure you ain't. Yeah.
So the question is, what is the final straw? This is talking about causality. So causality disappears at the flick of a switch. Researchers demonstrate superpositions using a device compromising a single atom. And this was written by Andrew Masterson's reports. scientists have succeeded in observing one of the strangest predictions of quantum theory, the breakdown of causality. In the macro world, causality is a fundamental property. If one thing happens, it causes another to follow it. Cause and effect. It's causality. For instance, if a tap is turned on, water flows out, as long as water is connected to it in a pipe method, under at least some kind of pressure. Let's just put some caveats on there. But a perfect experiment is a physics explanation, which is you've got a tap, you turn it, water comes out. Or if a drum is struck, a sound is heard. If this, as the saying goes, then that. On a quantum level, however, cause and effect breaks down. The weirdest of quantum mechanics means that events can happen without a set of order. The physicist Jacques Romero from the University of Queensland in Australia said. To prove this, Romero and colleagues constructed a tiny machine known as a photonic quantum switch, essentially a gate mechanism built from a single atom that can be turned on and off by using a single photon. Such switches were first designed in 2014 by scientists at Harvard University in the US and are seen as critical components for future secure quantum computers. Essentially, by altering the state of a single atom, a flow of photons can either be opened or closed. Romero's team used a quantum photonic switch to demonstrate that two possible operations, dubbed A and B, can exist in a superposition of their two possible orders, two states. By changing the polarization of the photons, the scientists were able to demonstrate that one did not need to precede the other. In essence, the two operations could happen in any sequence, a condition known as indefinite causal order. Take the example of your daily trip to work, where you travel partly by bus and partly by train, explains Romero. Normally, you would take the bus, then the train, or the other way round. In our experiment, both of these events can happen first. The scientists showed that the order of events occurring with the switch depended entirely on polarization, not causality. There's a quote here. By measuring the polarization of the photons at the output of the quantum switch, we were able to show the order of transformations on the shape of light was not set, says co-author Fabio Costa. This is just a first proof of principle, but on a larger scale, indefinite causal order can have real practical applications, like making computers more efficient or improving communication. So,
there's more research. Sorry, there's more research, of course, that goes on. With this, and it was recently proved, and we'll probably share it with you next time. It was in fact proved that the how can I put this best? That things that are bigger than even a few atoms, right, can be in a superposition. They did it via vibrating states. So it is possible for the cat, like for an object the size of a cat, because once you've got a collection of objects, it doesn't really matter how many atoms you collect, right? So you've got one atom, you've got two atoms, you can have many atoms, and they get molecules at the end of the day. But anyway, we'll share that with you next time. We're having a bit of change of track now, because we have now looked at the reason we shared all of this with you was to understand just exactly how hard science or the accepted scientific consensus treats reality. I mean, how real is reality, right? And it turns out, well, maybe not all that real after all, or certainly not in the way that we understand it to be real, right? So reality used to be whatever makes you stumble in the night. So if you walk in a dark room and you fall over, that's reality right there for you. But it seems to be a lot more complex and a lot harder to nail down. Does that make a difference for us in our everyday lives? Well, of course it does. I mean, not immediately, and certainly not in the lives that we are leading. But what if this life that we have wasn't the only life? What if we were coming back over and over and over again to this life, or to this world, to do whatever we do in different bodies with different names, different faces, or similar faces, similar names, whatever, it doesn't really matter. If the nature of reality is not what we think it is, and if maybe we are coming back to this place all the time, then should we not make it a top priority to understand this reality, to really get behind what is happening to us here and why? Because right now we don't know. We don't know. And again, if you're a religious person, you can say, "Oh, it doesn't matter when I die. I'll go to the afterlife and whatever." And if you're an atheist, you say, "Oh, it doesn't matter when I die. I'm just going to feed the worms." But what if you're both wrong?
Yeah.
What if the oldest religions and faiths and philosophies in the world are right? And they say, "Well, you know what? I think reincarnation is a thing, guys. I think it is. Could be." Right? Yeah. What then? What then? Right? Look, in the Matrix, and I don't know if this is true or not, but if you look at the Matrix in its final analysis, there have been other science fiction novels and movies, such as Aeon Flux, for example, where reincarnation is in fact a very real thing, right? So do these people come back? Because Neo is coming back. Neo came back over and over and over.
That's right.
There wasn't just one Neo, right? For instance, right? Because just if there's such a thing as reincarnation, and I'm inclined to say yes, yes there is, then we must really rethink our approach to life. Of course, look, if your religious beliefs tell you there isn't, and you're going to a place, etc., or there might be paradise or whatever waiting for you. But I mean, good for you. That's great. But I do look at empirical evidence, and I do look at evidence as well that might lie beyond the boundaries of empirical research and the scientific method, because you can't ignore it just because your methodology doesn't work anymore.
That's right.
So now the interesting thing here, and we actually spend a bit of time on this, I think we can get through quite a bit of it. There are a couple of, in fact, more than a couple, three. We're going to focus on three researchers. There's Ian Stevenson, Jim B. Tucker, and most interestingly of all, Dr. Helen Wambach. We're going to have a look at these and what they have to say, because it is very important to the hypothesis that we look at this. There's more material, and we've done whole shows on this, so if you want more material, happy to send it to you. But let's just go into it by asking the question: really, Mackie? Really? Reincarnation? Really? The psychiatrist Ian Stevenson devoted the last 40 years of his, or more now, to the scientific documentation of past life memories of children, specifically from all over the world. He has over 3,000 cases in his files. Many people, including skeptics and scholars, agree that these cases offer the best evidence yet for reincarnation. Dr. Stevenson's credentials are impeccable. He's a medical doctor and had many scholarly papers to his credit before he began paranormal research. Again, this word paranormal, I don't like it. It is just the normal we don't understand yet. He's the former head of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Virginia and is now the director of the Division of Personality Studies, also at the University of Virginia. Dave?
That's absolutely right. For nearly 15 years, Jim B. Tucker, what's res mean? Is that a resident?
Yeah.
89, 1989, I suppose. An associated psychiatry professor at the UVA Medical Center's Division of Perceptual Studies has been investigating 2,500 cases made by children, usually between the ages of 2 and 6 years old, who say they've had past lives. The children are sometimes able to provide enough detail about those lives that their stories can be traced back to an actual person, rarely famous and often entirely unknown to the family, who died years before. So that means that the family had no connection to this person that the child is claiming to have been in their last life. Therefore, they would never have heard a story about it, blah, blah, blah. Tucker's research, based in part on the cases accumulated all over the world by his predecessor, Ian Stevenson, who died in 2007, has caused little stir. Tucker, whose research is funded entirely by an endowment, began his reincarnation research in the late 1990s after he read an article in the Charlottesville Daily Progress about Stevenson's office winning a grant to study the effects of near-death experiences. Tucker says, I was curious about the idea of life after death, fix that in post, and whether the scientific method could be used to study it. He began volunteering with Stevenson's department and after a few years found himself a permanent researcher in the office, where his duties included overseeing the electronic coding of Stevenson's reincarnation cases. That coding took years. Stevenson's handwritten case files reach back to 1961, but Tucker said the work is yielding intriguing insights. Roughly 70% of the children say they died violent or unexpected deaths in their previous life. Males account for close to 3/4 of those deaths, almost precisely in the same ratio of males who die of unnatural causes in the general population. More cases are reported in countries where reincarnation is part of the religious culture, but Tucker says there is no correlation between how strong a case is deemed and that the family's beliefs in reincarnation or not. 1 out of 5 children who report a past life say they recall the intermission, the time between death and birth. Although there is no consistent view of what that's like, some alleged they were in God's house, while others claimed they waited near where they died before going inside their mother. In cases where the child's story has been traced to another individual, the median time between the death of that person and the child's birth is about 16 months. Further research by Tucker and others has shown that children generally have above average IQs and do not possess any mental or emotional disorders beyond average groups of children. Nothing statistically apparent there. None appears to have been disassociating from painful family situations. Nearly 20% of the children studied have scar-like birthmarks or even unusual deformities that closely match marks or injuries the person whose life the child recalls received at or near his or her death. Most children's claims generally subside around age 6, coinciding roughly with what Tucker says is the time the children's brains ready themselves for the new stage of development. Despite the otherworldly nature of these stories, almost none of the children exhibit any signs of being particularly enlightened. Tucker says, he goes on to quote, "My impression of the children is that while a few make philosophical statements about life, most are just typical kids," he says. it might be a situation similar to not being any smarter on the first day of first grade than you were on the last day of kindergarten, if that makes any sense. How exactly the consciousness, or at least the memories, of one person might transfer to another is obviously a mystery, but Tucker believes the answers might be found within the foundations of quantum physics. Good on him. Scientists have long known that matter, like electrons and protons, produce events only when observed. Mechie. Oh, actually, I'll take it. And a simplified example. Take light and shine it through a screen with two slits cut in it. Behind the screen, put a photographic plate that records the light. When the light is unobserved, it travels. The plate shows it went through both slits, but what happens when the light is observed? The plate shows that the particles go through one of the slits only. The light's behavior changes only, and the only difference is that it is being observed. There's plenty of debate on what that might mean, but Tucker, like Max Planck, the father of quantum physics, believes that the discovery shows that the physical world is affected by, and even derived from, the non-physical, from consciousness. If that's true, then consciousness does not require a 3-pound brain to exist, Tucker says, and there's no reason. Tucker says, and so there's no reason to think that consciousness would end with it. So it means you would be retained. I always put this, Mechie, to like playing a video game. You put your coin in, you play the video game, and when the video game ends, you can put a coin in and play it again. It's still you playing the game in both instances. You take a little bit of knowledge from one of the games to the next one, but the character you're playing in there ceases and a new one is established. But it's still you. Right?
Because again, we discussed this at length. I mean, when you stop being you, if we had a way to extract consciousness, our us out of our body, right, out of our brain, out of our physical presence, it would still be us. If we could perfectly preserve it and put it into a pot somewhere, for example, right, it'd still be you in that pot, minus a body, but it would still be you. So, and it's interesting, just before we get on to the most important and I think the most interesting reincarnation research that we came across, it's interesting to note that children, or 70% of the children that do remember a past life, had a violent end to their lives. In my mind, there is a process here at play which we don't know yet, we don't understand, that I guess moves our consciousness or some form of whatever we are to somewhere else and then back again into another body, as a bird seems. But if something like a violent death, like not a peaceful transition, let's call it, okay, interferes with that process, then it seems that memory fragments lodge themselves in the consciousness and stay with the child into the next life, if you will, something that we don't observe with most people. We just, like the people that do remember it, again, the case files here are in the thousands for all these researchers, right? Yep. Not in the millions or the hundreds of millions. Now, could that be a question of funding? Well, maybe if we had more people going out there trying to research this stuff, maybe we would find a lot more cases, potentially. I don't know, right? Possibly, but right now we're dealing with thousands and thousands of cases, not millions, but not one or two.
But there's also a big difference culturally, where you might be a child growing up in a family who you attempt to communicate that you remember a past life in some way, shape, or form, and your parents go, "Shush, shut up. That's not a thing."
That's right.
And so you bury it, never to be spoken about again, and then you forget.
100%.
After 6, yeah.
100%. That's exactly right. So the question then becomes, how much of that is happening? I would say that would happen quite a bit.
Yeah, likewise.
Now, okay, so there's a skeptic who set out to disprove reincarnation, and this was Dr. Helen Wambach, and she set about to prove how foolish the whole idea of reincarnation was by conducting a scientific investigation of her own in the 1960s. Dr. Wambach questioned 1,088 white, middle-class subjects from California while they were under hypnosis. The subjects were asked to regress to former life. If this was successful, they were told to remember everything when they awoke from their hypnotic state. Not satisfied to just ask who they were or when they lived, Dr. Wambach also made them describe their status, gender, race, clothing, footwear, utensils, tools they used, their money, housing, and even the food they ate. The subjects frequently reported viewing the former lives much like watching a movie. They said they could experience whatever the individual experienced in that particular time. They heard ancient languages but did not understand them. The full details of their experiences were recorded both during and after the sessions. Dr. Wambach went on to publish her findings in Reliving Past Lives, the Evidence Under Hypnosis, and Life Before Life, published in 1984. Although she began her work as a skeptic, she would later write, fantasy and genetic memory could not account for the pattern that emerged in the results. With the exception of 11 subjects, all the descriptions of clothing, footwear, and utensils were consistent with historical records. And in later interviews, she stated, I don't believe in reincarnation, I know it. Now, before we go on, we're going into something else. Sorry?
Boom, mic drop.
Mic drop.
That's right.
Yeah, no.
Done.
I don't believe in reincarnation, I know it. Now think about that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
She came, all guns blazing, this is nonsense. Let's just disprove it. And we did a show on this, and I do urge you to go and listen to the more, I guess, detailed accounts of these studies. And some of these studies are truly, and some of the cases, you just shake your head and you go, wow, I mean, how, right? I mean, unless all of these people are lying, all these researchers, unless they're all lying, it's all a hoax, we have something here, right? But then you have to ask yourself, well, what's the point? Why devote decades of your life to this, right? And without, I mean, any other game afoot or any other agenda that I can see. And certainly, why go into this a skeptic and coming out going, no, it's a thing. I know it's a thing. There's no agenda here that I can see. Again, right? This is important to understand. But again, this is only of no value if they all lie. They all lie about the research. It's all a fabrication. It's all nonsense. If it isn't, then maybe all the subjects are lying. But really, you get all these thousands of people, and they're all not just regular folk, I guess. Maybe they're not really all that up on history and all that. But to find, 1,000 people that are really well versed in various periods of history and can describe it all, you got to ask yourself, in order for this to be a hoax, and all these people collaborating, that's a lot of effort to no meaningful end that I can see. To be honest with you,
one of the best examples. So there's so many, but just giving you one, was a boy who remembered the name, rank, and serial number, the ship that he left from in a mission in World War II, his flight buddy, his flight companion on board his aircraft, and the method of death. He knew the mission name. He knew all of these things, and he wasn't like a famous person. It wasn't. No one had actually done the research on this individual, so he knew all of those things. And when it was researched, they could only find little pockets of info about this individual in lots of different locations. It wasn't something you could just go online and go Google the name, rank, and serial number, and up comes this, transcript of the person's life. It was gathered from many different sources. No one had ever done the research, and yet this boy of 6, not coached, or 5, I think at the time, he knew it all. Now, that's an extraordinary case because they had so much good detail to be able to track it, and yet people say that it's not real. Where he was in, there isn't a way that that boy could have known unless it was real, and it's a great determination to make. There's no randomness that would allow the universe in any way, shape, or form to have that boy to be lucky enough to remember random facts and make them up to be able to match the exact life of somebody. It's just too much there. If you've got 20 pieces of information that he could bring forward, which he did, more or less, and every one of them was correct, not iffy, correct, then there's something to it.
And bear in mind, and Dave is absolutely correct, this is just a phenomenal, detailed case. But bear in mind that most of the ancient cultures, if not all, believed in reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
And again, most, if not all, believed that we had to escape this what they call the wheel of reincarnation, right? We have to escape it. And the way to escape it is to let go of all earthly ties and desires and such trappings, And funnily enough, I mean, it's echoed in all the religions. If you read it right, if you understand what you're reading, I'll give you a simple example, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is what some of the mysteries, the one mystery school that I was allowed entry to teaches, is you have to read it knowing what you're reading. And other mystery schools and societies have that as well. It's usually in plain sight. These things are hidden in plain sight. It's not hidden. You just don't see it because you don't know what you're looking at,
mm-hmm.
right? And specifically, no offense to anyone, but like a Masonic handshake, unless you know how to reciprocate, it means nothing to you. It's just someone's shaking your hand in a specific way, but unless you initiate, it doesn't mean anything. Right? So this is the same. And one of the things that was given to us in the Bible, in the New Testament, Jesus said, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the gates of heaven, or paradise, or whatever you call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what that really means is that if you have all these attachments to the world, if you're rich, then you definitely have them, right? Otherwise you would be rich. And unless you free yourself of them, you have no chance of ever escaping this place. Right? And in my opinion, again, when Jesus talks about the kingdom of heaven or paradise or whatever, he's not talking about this Christian heaven, paradise ideal. He's just talking about going home.
Mm.
Going home to where we belong, just escaping this world, which, again, if you believe the Gnostic teachings, is the world of the great adversary. The great, I want to say evil, but certainly the great opposition to the true God, as they called it. We live in a world of gross matter. We are, this unclean is the wrong word, but we are heavy. We are spiritually heavy. Our body's heavy. We have heavy thoughts. We have bad heavy thoughts, and to be inelegant about this, what we have to try to do is be lighter. We have to be lighter. We have to get rid of all these burdens and trappings and attachments, and we hear it everywhere. It is echoed through all the philosophies and religions in the world. Very few don't have that concept. Now, we're not going to go any further
today,
because what we're going to focus on for the next couple of shows, and it's really only just probably a couple of shows, probably more than a couple maybe, but we're going to talk about the escape.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's the point of talking about all of this and ending with the hypothesis and saying, look, we believe we're living in this massive prison here, our minds are in prison, our bodies, and we are forced to be reincarnated into these bodies over and over again, and then we find inside, etc. What's the point? Unless we can also then give you at least a glimpse of a potential escape. Similarly to the gentleman who escaped Plato's Cave, or Neo who escaped the Matrix, or any other hero. Oh, the rain's come. Or any other hero you wish to think of that has escaped a labyrinth or a prison to see the light, as it were. In fact, a lot of tales, ancient tales, deal with exactly that narrative as well in the final analysis, right? The hero's journey to enlightenment and all the trappings that come with it. Because there is an exit. There is an escape. It's not easy. It's not easy. And in fact, I think it's almost impossible for most people to achieve, but not it is not a definite failure, right? It is almost possible, but not impossible. Improbable, yes. And it's tough. And it means you have to turn your back from all the things that you know, probably. And if you look at people that are trying to do it, just give you an idea. You look at the, I guess, the mendicants, which are sort of monks that are begging monks. They call it. It's not really begging; it's probably the wrong word. But these are people that have nothing. These sages and yogis and monks that go around the world, usually not too far because they can't get there. In their own countries, they usually stay. But they only live because other people feed them, and other people come to listen to what they have to say, and other people have great respect for what they're trying to achieve. But they literally own nothing except what they have on them, like maybe a rope or sandals.
Yeah. But, I knew a Swami once that was like that.
And is this for everybody? Well, no, of course not. Yeah. But if we want to get out of this cycle of reincarnation, then that's a path we would have to follow, right? Some people are lucky in that they're born into cultures that encourage that. Others are not, where this kind of lifestyle is actively discouraged, right? What do you mean? You're going to be a street performer. Go and study medicine. Off you go. And it's really, again, this material focus we have, especially right now in our dominant civilization on this planet. And this is on purpose as well, by the way.
To keep us
It is
here.
on purpose. To keep us here, my friend. 100%. 100%.
Could you imagine how difficult it would be to exist here on Earth, live a full life, and not have any material goods?
Possible. I mean, not
It's
impossible,
certainly a challenge.
It would be tough.
Yeah.
It'd be tough. I mean, look at the homeless people in your area.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's the life in many ways. Right? Of course, I'm not saying that these homeless people have chosen this life.
No, that's right.
Certainly, if in fact, imagine yourself choosing that life, and then because we look at homeless people and we think, how did that happen to you? How could you let this happen to you, etc., etc. Right? And now look at the person that chooses that life, and they'll think, well, you're insane. You're clearly insane.
Mm.
You must be. You have to be insane to live like that. Right.
So, I've spoken with Meki. I've spoken with some homeless whose life, while it's very difficult to get a clear and concise timeline from people who have lost time to this affliction, because their time is no longer this linear thing that they remember every day is because it kind of merges into one. But life was going just fine until their circumstances changed so dramatically that they could no longer afford to live in our society and fell out of our society the way we've created them. And there was no support, and that's why they ended up where they did, on the street, living rough, or sleeping rough. And
Right.
and when we look at our traditional custodians of the land, Meki, and how they didn't even have a word that meant an ownership of anything,
Mm-hmm.
there's some real lesson right there.
That's a really good point. Because they actively remember what we call the dream time, which is complete. You see, the white people, again, we spoke about this before, but white people think, oh, this is just something they remember from the old time, like a golden age. Not at all. Not at all.
It's
is
the
not
everywhen,
that.
isn't it?
It's the everywhen. It is now. We just can't connect to it. It's not something that happened and is now gone. It's something that is here, but we can no longer access. That's the dream. Dream
Yeah.
time. If dream time is not even the right word for it. We have lost connection to the real world here where we are, right? But the Aborigines, like you said, I mean, they literally only had what they really needed to live.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and of course, they didn't survive the onslaught of other cultures as they came, especially Europeans, because it was a culture. You couldn't have two cultures more opposite.
That's
You
right.
couldn't. Like it's not possible. Which makes me think: is the Aboriginal culture that devoted itself to getting out of here, as it were? Because the thing is this,
Unknowingly
if
possible.
we had a culture that devoted itself to getting out of here in the way that we just described, that's what it would look like. Okay? That's exactly what it would look like. We wouldn't get ourselves, tied down with stuff. We just use what is there while we're here, while we live. But then the key focus is to escape into the dreaming. Go back to the dreaming.
Oh, perfect ending today for Shiny Side Out with Dave and Meki, and we're going to catch you again as Shiny Side Out same time next Sunday. And in the middle of the week, we also have a 7 a.m. Eastern time show in Tuesday and Thursday mornings. And thank you for listening, and do like, subscribe, comment, and share this on YouTube. And we'll do it all again next week. Coming up next, not sure what's coming up next. I know Jed can't make his show after hours, but stay tuned, and we'll see you again.